Sometimes my timing is a bit too late. There are times I've looked into doing side quests on a game only to find out that it's under NDA, or in some cases, like this one, find out the closed beta test is completely over and that instead of leaving the servers up until open beta, they just shut down everything, making it impossible for me to do a video on it until it's back in open beta. This happened to be one of those games. From what I understand, there's still a bit of interest in this game since it went into launch. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Raiders. Published by Perfect World and developed by Myatt Entertainment, Raiders is a 3D action MMO that combines hack-and-slash, third-person combat with full exploration and world MMO gameplay. Raiders was released this year in both closed beta and launch, and seeing only a few available weeks in closed beta before shutting down the servers until they were ready for launch. People seem to have a hard time discerning what Raiders is, calling it a Monster Hunter-styled game like the now-defunct Hunter Blade, a Vindictus-like game, or the free version of Terra. The third one is the right one, by the way. Let's get this going. Off the bat, I may think this game draws the most design inspiration from Terra, but it is not even remotely close to Terra when it comes to visuals. I was running Terra on minimum on my old PC, and running this game on max, and Terra still looks better. It's hard to put my finger on it, but the whole thing gets across as kind of muddled, and it just doesn't come across very crisp looking, with certain odd graphic effects that will irk a lot of people who place a lot of stock in visual quality. Like the shadows leaving odd patterns on sloped textures, or the insane camera leaping issue like in Guild Wars 2, despite it not being quite as spastic. There's little balance in the graphics too, with some areas looking pretty low res and generally unimpressive, and others looking amazing for what the game is working with. It's just not very polished looking, is what I'm trying to say. The character models look fine, and the armor in the game is actually pretty good looking when you get into the higher levels, but the game regardless eschews the normal path of having your starting armor look like it was dug out of the trash. Let's just say it ends up looking even better down the line. Still, for what the game is, once you get used to the aesthetic, it comes across okay. And this game isn't a game that's tough to run on maximum settings, even running max shadows, a feature I usually cut for the sake of recording frame rates. It gives me no issue, and hell, I'd swear the game runs better with it. The shadow effects actually play a key role in some situations, as I once, with shadows off, went into a cave that looked like it was being lit by a nuclear explosion, only to see the effect was to compensate the shadow effect that was normally placed within it. There's even an early boss monster where leaving the shadow effect on is a mechanic, as the boss will leap high into the air and out of view, only visible by its shadow before coming crashing back to the ground. In short, maxing this shouldn't be a problem for many PCs, but just don't expect to be blown away. One thing you're going to notice right away is that you won't hear much in the way of music. After a pretty nice and fitting opening track for the login and character select screen, the game, for the most part, remains musicless, up until you get in certain battles or certain areas. Many of the tracks for them are amazing, especially the boss fights. They really punctuate the action of the fights and the environment you're fighting in, making boss battles all the more something to look forward to. Personal favorite tracks are the Garden Master fight, which I'll be using in the gameplay portion of the video, and the Fleetfoot fight, which I'm using in the end credits. Sound, on the other hand, serious mixed bag going on here. Battle sounds for the most part are fine. Swinging and hitting your weapons sounds fine, and your character's shouts don't really get grating, as they're downplayed quite a bit. The issue lies in two categories. The first being a lot of the stock sounds you'll hear. The first time a troll screams at you, you'll go, "Wait, was that the zombie from Doom?" And when one of the bosses starts charging at you with a shrill scream, just prepare yourself to immediately recall the Bungie zombies from Plants vs. Zombies. No mistake, they're the exact same noises. The second issue lies in the voice acting. Oh god, the voice acting. No, it's not the hilarious "use your shield well" of Hunter Blade, but more the Resident Evil 1 style of voice acting. It ranges from forced to goofy to weak to lazy, and it's impossible to take any of it seriously.
I know Arl all too well. Do you think Arl will give you another chance after you've failed so many times?
No. How do you know about Arl? Who are you?
I have no more business with you. Goodbye, James.
Starting out, you'll have a choice between two servers. Since no regional information was listed, nor any other type of specifics, I just chose the one listed on the top, which in this case is called Daigo. All characters you create on one server will remain on that server. Afterward, head to the character creator, as you'll have none. You can choose your gender and tweak a couple features like hairstyle and color, outfit and face, and that's really it. You'll also choose a class which you start with, but with a feature I'll explain later on, just know you're not entirely locked into this choice. You can also choose a starting outfit and color for it, but just don't get too attached as you'll be replacing it with new armor fairly early on in the game. Classes are as follows. First up, the Defender, a sword and board tank type that plays defensively and counter-offensively. An extremely popular and easy to use class, Defenders can just often hold the blocking stance while enemies attack them, often negating the entire damage output and activating their counter-attack buff. It allows for a boost to attack and defense, as well as activating a whole set of secondary skills. They use one-handed swords and maces, as well as an offhand shield. Next is the Berserker, who's all about the attack. Although their two-handed sword and mace playstyles make them a bit slower, they hit much harder and gain strength as they attack. For range fans, there's the Sorcerer, who, as expected, place much of their attack focus on range magic spells and wield staves, even though they do have an option to use a one-handed sword and shield as well. If you're looking to be a healer, there's always Cleric, the holy warrior type with a myriad of healing spells and light-based range attacks. Cleric can use a mace and shield, two-handed hammer, or staff. There are other classes in the works, like the Ranger and the Assassin, but they've yet to be implemented in the North American version of this game. The game starts you out in somewhat of a tutorial area, where you're asked to assist a band of pirates with their problems, as well as find an archaeologist and some ruins, all of which will set forth the events for the rest of the game. Getting used to the controls is imperative here, as while the game does its best to ease you into it, it's not entirely difficult to figure out, as long as you grasp the basic concepts. Moving the mouse steers your character and aims the crosshair. W and S move you forward and back, and A and D strafe, considering how the camera controls like a first-person shooter. Left-click, either tapping or holding, swings your main weapon, and holding right-click puts you in a blocking stance. Double-tap in any direction to dodge an attack. When you have available skills, which you start with 1, you can place them in the hotkeys 1 through 10, or the secondary hotkey skills of F1 through F10. Press E to activate nodes, speak with NPC characters, or open a player menu with other players. Press Control to toggle between cursor mode or camera mode. These can all be changed in the options menu if you so desire. There are 3 specific meters on the interface you need to keep a track of, your HP, EP, and SP, which appear as a red bar, a blue bar, and a yellow bar respectively. HP is your health. Health is self-explanatory. Deplete this and you're dead. Something to note that your health does not regenerate very quickly. You can press Z to have your character sit, but even in this method, barely speeds up the process. You'll have to purchase potions or food items in order to get your health back up in a decent amount of time. Unless you like stopping every few fights to wait around for several minutes at a time. One word of warning, using food recovery items will cause you to take 3 times the normal damage while you're being healed. So while you can use them in combat, it's probably not the best idea unless you're sure you can get to safety. EP, or energy points, is basically your mana. If you have a spellcasting class, this is a bar you have to worry about, but Berserkers and Defenders will probably never burn through this bar, and shouldn't have to worry about it all that much. The final bar, SP, or stamina points, is one all classes need to keep an eye on. Unlike some games where stamina means health, and other games where stamina means the amount of time you can play before the game locks you out of your character for the day, in this game, it's the limit to how much you can use certain skills, dodge, or block without having to recover. Deplete this and you can't use those skills and abilities. Using your normal attack does not deplete this bar, however, and it recharges pretty quickly. Understanding how this different control style translates to combat is key to survival in this game. Knowing when to slash, dodge, sidestep, block, use skills, and how to chain it all together will get you the best results. You can even perform a thrust attack by pressing forward an attack, or an evasive strike with back an attack. These attacks also eat up your stamina. There are also enemy attacks that are completely unblockable, save for the use of specific skills, but keep in mind that they are very telegraphed moves, and the enemy will usually flash red before casting one. I say usually because there are times where you're not going to be able to block an attack, or an attack that looks like you wouldn't be able to block it at all is easily blockable. It just requires some kind of memorization is all. Occasionally during fights you might knock away a part of the enemy, which you may be able to pick up. These can be as simple as small parts that grant you a short temporary buff, or sometimes you might get a separate set of attacks and skills, with usable weapons like swords, bows, or this. Just like the buff items, they are only usable for a short period of time before they vanish. As a world MMO, knowing how to obtain quests is vital progression. Look for NPCs with golden exclamation points. When next to a quest NPC, press E to open a dialog box. Here you can use your mouse cursor to click the dialogue options and accept the quest, or use the hotkeys it prompts you to hit. Once accepted, it's easy to track by pressing J to bring up the list, or M to see the quest locations pointed out on the map. Be careful, as sometimes the game can be tricky with a quest, like requiring you to equip a certain item before the NPCs you need to speak to will even acknowledge you. You don't have to read the quest text, but check the journal to have things better spelled out for you. Enemy respawn happens decently fast in this game, not so fast where you're being constantly overwhelmed by enemies, but not so slow where you're forced to wait around for the enemies that you need for a quest. This does tend to vary though, as I only need to wait around seconds for another of the first boss monster to appear, and what felt like 10 minutes for the Ghost Wolf in Ada Mountains. Otherwise, for the most part, I feel it's paced well. Leveling up grants you points to input into your skill tree, which you're initially locked into your original class choice for at least 10 levels. After level 10, you have the option to place points into another class tree, essentially taking on the skills available to that class. But be warned that some class skills can't be used without that weapon. For a true hybrid class, try to choose a weapon that combines with another class weapon, like combining a defender and a cleric if you want to use a mace and shield. This isn't the best idea for early on, but the option is there. You'll also gain a couple skill reset guides that not only let you reset the points you earn to place in more suitable locations, but you can outright change your class with these. The first one you get will need to be used up by level 15 though, or they will be rendered completely worthless. Death is pretty simple in this game. You have a limited number of res scrolls that can revive you where you fell, usually at 60% health, and you can earn some more as you play. The second option is to revive at the nearest soulstone, which are green rocks scattered around the field. Choosing the second option will revive you at full health, but you'll take on a debuff that weakens you severely for a short while. All gear you're wearing takes damage as well, so you'll need to find an NPC to repair your gear, and most shops, regardless of what they sell, can repair you. Here's an interesting feature, where people are probably getting all the Monster Hunter comparisons from. Nearly all the gear in the game is crafted. You find an NPC that can create armor pieces and use your numerous loot drops to make the piece for a small fee. A nice feature is that you can track your materials to create a crafted item with the recipe feature. That adds the materials all to your quest log and updates you when you found them all. You can even open the quest log and mouse over the magnifying glass to see what enemies drop the items you need. It's a nice touch. There's this one time you actually have to craft a special weapon out of this powerful material that you only obtain after making a deal with ancient gods, in order to defeat a legendary summoned creature that is believed to be invincible, and yet there's an existing recipe to make armor out of his skin. Of course. Crafting is pretty much the only way to gain equipment in this game. It doesn't drop, and you can't just buy the items unless you're looking to snatch them from the auction house. It's rarely given as a quest reward. You have to keep collecting the appropriate materials and creating the pieces you want. Do you risk having lower level quality gear for a while just to save up for a much better boss crafted set that will last you a few levels, or do you keep updated constantly, or deal with not having the top tier gear for that level, fully satisfied knowing that you'll just have to upgrade it in a few levels anyway? Even the hide helm option is a crafted recipe by finding the NPC and crafting the invisible hat costume. This right here is where the comparisons to Monster Hunter should really just end, provided they're still being made. You really don't take on the look of the monsters that you've killed from the armors you craft, and besides having to kill the same monster a few times to grind up the materials you need, it's just not a fair comparison to make. It's an open world, and it's a lot more like Terra. End of story. Most equipment can be upgraded with certain NPCs, like adding socketed jewels or enhancing your gear using the tried and true method of charging a small fee, requiring a certain item, and increasing the chance to fail, possibly downgrading or even destroying the item when upgrading to higher levels. You can also gain materials by gathering, which works like most other MMOs. You'll need a pickaxe to harvest ore and a shovel to harvest plants. You'll need lockpicks to unlock chests, but be warned you need one for each chest, instead of the situation you'd have with a shovel or pickaxe, so make sure to stock up on lockpicks. There's a chain of quests linked to gathering as well. We will be given the task to earn a certain amount of tokens by gathering, and turn them in to learn the next tier of items to gather. Just make sure to use the book item you'll receive from the quest. Looting is simple. When an enemy dies, if they have loot, just press E to open the loot menu. Pressing E again will just take everything they hold. You have a limited number of inventory slots, but a generous 80, and many of the items stack to massive amounts. When in the inventory, you can press arrange to sort the items or stack up any stackable you might have missed, and also click on the above tabs to highlight certain items, like items needed for your listed recipes or equipment, so it doesn't get entirely lost in the cluster. Press I to access your inventory and press H to bring up your equipment menu. You might notice getting around this game is a bit of a pain. While the worlds are large and open, unlike Terra and other games of the Lineage ilk, the worlds are at least populated with enemies. Still, getting around is kind of a pain, but pressing R to autorun lessens that pain a bit. You can also bind to inns in the major towns and teleport to them using return stones, purchased at most item NPCs, the same ones that'll also sell you food. The cooldown on these stones is 15 minutes, and you use up one every time you teleport. In towns, there's also teleport NPCs who will take you to certain areas of the game for a fee, as long as you're the appropriate level. The most expected form of fast travel is the mounts, first available as an ostrich-like bird called a moa. The one on the newbie area is a rental only. Talk to an NPC and you'll be granted access to it for as long as you don't dismiss it, or if you get knocked off of it by an enemy. Later on you can find the trainer NPC in the first town to more or less craft one. It requires a few materials from enemies that you won't encounter until level 10 and level 13, so expect that. Granted, you could probably just purchase them as well, but considering how easy they are to obtain, the fact that you need to pay a 1 gold fee to craft it, it's probably just better to wait. There are 2 other tiers available to the MOA. The Gale MOA, which allows a very short burst of speed with an absurdly long 3-minute cooldown, and the Valor MOA, which moves only marginally faster than the previous MOA, and gains the ability to do a charge attack that immediately dismounts you to more easily engage in combat from horseback, birdback, whatever. The first 2 MOA run 20% faster than your foot speed, and the third and final one runs 25% faster. All MOA come equipped with their own onboard stereo. Later versions of the MOA also require you to complete a certain quest. You can't just buy the materials to get the best ones right off the bat. Once crafted, the mount will appear in your inventory, but beware that occasionally you may not be able to summon it through there, and may have to move it to the action bar before you can ride it. This game isn't really that hard to grasp, and especially if you've come from other MMOs, it's going to feel really kind of second nature to you. But if you like the idea of reticle combat, like in Terra, or you're just sick of the target and click combat in most other fantasy MMOs, this game might be worth a shot for that aspect alone. Community in this game, quite the mixed bag to talk about, really. There's aspects all over the place that should be addressed, but first things first. Instances in the game don't always behave in the same way as most MMOs. Only a few are actually separate from the rest of the community and require you to have a party. Others can have anyone enter them, and it gets kind of annoying when they become crowded if you're just after a certain NPC. Other times a boss monster will just appear right out in the open. Luckily, some boss monsters will give you credit for defeating them, even if you weren't the first person to hit them, so you'll have that at least for quest purposes. Yeah, this game also features the tagging system, which, again, I'm steadily becoming not much of a fan of. Still better than the most damage gets credit system, but still not great. Like most games with a tagging system, if the enemy is credited to another player, the enemy name and health will appear in gray. You can still attack the monster to help out, but unless you're in a party, don't expect loot or credit, save for the aforementioned boss monsters. Other instances take a more classic approach of having a group of enemies in a room randomly stationed about until you come across a boss, where you keep going down this pattern until you reach the last boss in the dungeon. These actually get pretty interesting, as there are some environmental puzzles and traps in some of these that require you to watch your footing in addition to just hacking away at enemies until you reach the next set piece. The bosses also get their own interesting mechanics as well, making it much more amusing than simple hit-and-run fights, like a boss that targets and charges you with an unblockable flaming sword attack, requiring you to get really familiar with the dodge mechanic if you don't want to watch your health melt away in a few shots. Party system is pretty basic too. There's a cap of 5 players total, and you can invite others by aiming at them, waiting for a green arrow to appear above that player, and then pressing E to open the player menu. Then selecting Invite to Party. This is also the menu where you can trade items or request a duel, which, by the way, is the only PvP system in this game at this point. Beware that the game seems to prioritize NPCs to players, so if you're trying to party up with someone next to an NPC, the game might decide to talk to the NPC by default. You're going to notice one thing right off the bat. This game is infested with gold spammers. The minute you start out, you'll see the chat block bombarded with several alphabet soup spoonfuls ranting about their ridiculously titled websites and several levels of broken English and varying levels of caps lock, making getting a word in edgewise to others nigh impossible. Since the game doesn't tell you how to block them except in a random loading screen tooltip, let me tell you right now and save you the headache. Type /B, a space, then the name of the person you want to block. There's usually anywhere from 2 to 5 spammers in a channel at any given time, but once you do away with them, the game's chat becomes actually usable. Of course, the problem with being forced to type out the name of the person you want to block is that some of the more clever gold spammers will have their name consist of randomly placed uppercase I's and lowercase L's. Well played, asshats. This game contains a real mixed bag of people, almost polar opposites running around. There have been times where a random stranger would just hand over a bunch of useful materials to me because they didn't need them, and others who will go around stealing quest mobs and gathering nodes when you're fighting. Hell, once when sitting in a relatively safe area to rest, a player decided to pull enemies to my location just so they would hit me and cancel the resting position. Dickheads abound, this game has. I was once helping out a party member with his quest raid to kill a boss NPC surrounded by a bunch of enemies. When I tried to take on the enemies for him, I ended up getting attacked and killed pretty quickly, but he was holding his own for a while. Then 2 other players rush in and they watch him start fighting these NPCs, and instead of helping him out, they just stand there and let him get his ass kicked. He eventually dies, they rush in and kill the boss. God, people suck. Still, even when I've seen chats devolve into several people picking on one another, I would say that my community experience has been overall good when compared to other games of a similar nature. For the most part, you shouldn't have trouble finding people to assist you and help you out. Just be wary of who you're dealing with. You know, I don't think I'll be spending too much time in here. There really isn't anything outright required to enjoy the game in here, and as you'd expect, the shop mostly consists of experience boosters, protective items that save you from downgrading or destroying items during the upgrade process, resurrection tokens that contain no penalty. It's shockingly limited. One thing I do find interesting are the costume potions, which turn any piece of armor you can equip into a costume piece that will override the look of all your equipment. So if you find a certain armor set you prefer the look of, you can wear that instead of worrying how the next upgrade might make you look. Since costume slots have their own equipment tab, this is a nice feature and doesn't force you to repeat the process every time you find a new armor set. The shop is annoyingly fond of lucky boxes, items that might contain an item you want. For example, you can purchase a swimsuit lucky box or a white Arad lucky box that would give you a small chance to earn a swimsuit outfit or a fast horse mount. Keyword is small chance. I wouldn't mind these as much if there were any other way to obtain items like these. Sure, the boxes are cheap, but you could be paying anywhere from 120 Zen to thousands of Zen just to possibly obtain an item that any more forgiving cash shop would have readily purchasable for a much steeper fee. Still, with nothing that screams required for convenience, this is a very much shop at your leisure kind of title. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect going into this game, but I was pleasantly surprised by everything in it. It may not be completely polished, but it's a solid action-based world MMO that contains interesting mechanics that set it apart from others like it. It's unquestionably worth a shot if you were interested in something like Terra, but being prepared for the minor annoyances should at least make this a fun time. Here's my final rating. If you've always liked the idea of action MMO combat in an open-world MMO, and you weren't about to drop money on Terra, this is a good game to check out. The game's hybrid class system offers some interesting opportunities for customization, and shows potential for interesting builds at later levels. The game's bosses and instances are actually quite entertaining, and really lend to the mechanics of the combat, making instances fun challenges rather than the standard enemy-grinding clickfests. This isn't really the kind of shop that is anything that will really draw you into it. While the costume potions are an interesting touch, the lack of being able to outright buy costumes seems strange, but it seems like something they plan to implement in the future. Otherwise, shop around to see what's most useful to you. Despite me having few problems with the community, there can be some seriously jerkish behavior going on, and logging on at just the wrong time can make all the difference to a newcomer. Being greeted by a mass of gold spammer messages doesn't really paint the ideal picture that the company behind the game really has a handle on or even cares about the situation. With no way to block beyond a chat command and no simple way to report the behavior, this might grate on players' nerves far before they ever give the game a fair shake. Also, if you used to play Terra, or expecting something that measures up to a fully developed subscription game, you might be disappointed by the game's messy translation, horrid voice acting, generally sloppy graphics, or extremely stupid name. If that bothers you all that much, you might not be able to get into this one. Next time, I'll be looking at another simple concept for a recent title that'll probably be way more complex than I'm bargaining for.
dares to strike down the master of the garden and damage my body?
Yeah, so much for him. We got to the root of the problem. Saved again.